record. There we go. So I'm going to go through my introduction, and then we'll talk with Alan after that. Sorry, I'm a little bit slow getting here to do this part. Share screen. If you haven't heard, PNSQC has been around for a long time. It stands for the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference. This year is the 39th annual conference. So next year we're looking forward to the 40th conference. Last year we held it virtually, even though we're organized in Portland. It was all online, so we could, talk to anyone on the globe during the conference. And this year we're also planning to have it virtual. So it's an opportunity, if you're not in the Portland area, or if you don't want to travel for the conference, to get involved and see what's, let me admit a couple more people, sorry. We're a nonprofit organization, and it's nearly all volunteer. The only paid administrator is Robert, who is really just an administrator. Everybody else, including myself, is a volunteer for the conference. I'm the volunteer marketing chair. Phil Liu, who is here from XBO Soft, is the program chair. And he's been helping with the conference for quite a while as well. The nice thing about PNSQC is it focuses on the quality practitioner, people that actually work in either testing or designing better software. And so we're open to a wide range of topics and speakers, from people that are new to speaking or presenting anything at a conference to people that are old hands at it. I mentioned that earlier. Alan spoken. He's both written a paper at PNSQC and he's been an invited speaker. He said he searched in the archives and he's actually written 3 papers for PNSQC. And if you search in the archives, you can also see his presentations. Right now, we have our call for abstracts. And so that's where we ask people to present their ideas on improving software quality. And to write an abstract, you just write a couple sentences, kind of your bio, and then you write your idea and a couple sentences supporting, giving us a little bit more idea about the idea. And then you submit that through our process called Open Conference. And if your proposal is accepted, you can count on a lot of support helping you through the paper. There are 3 options. Writing a paper is not the only option. We're also looking for people who might want to deliver a conference presentation, which is presentation only, no paper being written, but you still have to develop a PowerPoint presentation, or to develop a conference poster. And normally in an on-presence conference, the conference poster would be a single placard where you might describe an idea succinctly on a one-on-one kind of conversation. Since we're having it virtually, we're actually looking for people who want to be creative and maybe develop something interactive. So I don't know, Phil, maybe you could fill in a little bit more about what you think a conference poster might be. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Conference poster, well, normally it's somebody standing actually by a poster board. But this year, like you said, we're trying to make it more creative. So it could be, an interactive presentation presentation including a lot of different tools like, Slido or Mento or whatever, some Mentometer and so on, to make the presentation as interactive, fun, and exciting as possible.
And the main thing is that we're asking people to submit proposals for conference papers. And so you're asking, what would I submit for a proposal? And you just write an abstract, which is usually either a new idea that you might have, an existing idea that you've heard about and you actually tried during a project, or maybe a multi-year thing that you've been trying and you just want to reflect on the experience of using that idea. And you start with a problem statement. What are you trying to do? How is the problem solved? And then you evaluate, how well did your solution work, and are there next steps or implications for that? Let's say, for example, that you this year decided to try something new in your retrospectives of your projects, and you did this over multiple iterations, and it turned out that it was a horrible failure, but you think that you know a better way to do it. That's still an idea that you might want to tell people about your experience and how you failed, but also how you think that you can improve it in the future. So some benefits of just working with PNSQC as a volunteer. There's a lot of community, camaraderie, networking. You can get a discount for, well, you get in for free for writing the paper, and you can also get a reduced rate for entrance to the conference if you're volunteering or doing other presentations. And also the review process is really helpful. You might have an idea that's, let's say, a lump of clay, and when you get it in front of some reviewers, it can help you sculpt it into a nice little, something that really makes sense and is easy to present. And at the same time, like I'm learning right now, public speaking experience and skills, I'm getting used to talking on Zoom every once in a while, and here in this meetup is a good way to kind of talk to people and see what you're doing. And like Alan said, the archives, your paper is a permanent part of the archives. And so you can go out and find, I was looking the other day, and I was reading a paper from 1985, and the topic was, how do we know when to stop testing? And that's still a topic that's pertinent today. And that the paper was really interesting, actually, in terms of things I hadn't thought of before. I'm just a quick thing about me. I'm a developer and project leader. I've been working for in software for nearly 3 decades. I worked for a long time in the focus on health and insurance industries. If you wanted to ask me anything about PNSQC, I'm the marketing chair, not only for 2020, but also for 2021. And now I'll move over to Alan. Alan's been a software tester and director quality he's currently working for Unity. I think that's still correct. He has worked on a couple of books about testing, and he also writes about, let's see, I forget the title. Is it Modern Software Testing? Modern Testing?
Moderntesting.org.
I'll stop sharing, and I'm going to highlight Alan instead, and you can start talking. There you go. Spotlight for everyone. There you go.
What would you like me to talk about? The fact that I have stopped trimming my beard and cutting my hair?
Yeah, that one.
That could be a good topic.
Are you trying to look like Rainn Wilson?
God, I hope not.
Or Dwight, I guess, is how I should better call him. So what I was hoping to talk with you today about was new ideas, and kind of, there are tons of new ideas out there all the time. I'm always seeing new things, and I wonder, well, like, for example, you're saying, if you look at the talks in PNSQC from 20 years ago, a lot of the talks are still being given today in other places. So people get into a rut of kind of a certain idea. And I was wondering, how do you get new ideas, and how do you decide which ones to act on? Where do you find new ideas to start with?
The way you get new ideas is have a lot of ideas and throw the bad ones away.
There you go.
Yeah.
How long should you stick with an idea that's a new one?
It depends. I do have a short little presentation I can give to kind of kick this off as well, but you can look at, sometimes you have the eureka moment, and the idea is a good one. But then there's a thing called the slow hunch. Look at Tim Berners-Lee. It took him 10 years of thinking about hyperlink connected pages before he came up with the World Wide Web. So somewhere between a minute and 20 years should be good.
If you let's say that like you write a blog post for yourself that's 5 for Friday. Excuse Gesundheit. If you
Sorry guys, let me find that mute thing here.
I can help. There you go. If you want. The you do a blog post. I don't know if you do it every week, but you do a blog post of 5 for Friday, and you write down 5 things that you either learned or encountered or had to work on during the week. Yeah. And how did you start doing that idea, and has anything come out of that?
I don't know what's come out of it. So I read a lot. I get a lot of my ideas from reading books. And then I was on a Tim Ferriss kick, reading his books a year or two ago, a few years ago. And I started following him. He's a really good interviewer in his podcast. I don't agree with all of his ideas, but I can't subscribe to his podcast. It takes too long to listen to, but I will listen to some just because I like the topic of it. But one of the things he does, he did for years before I started a thing called 5 Bullet Friday, where he does sort of the same thing. And I thought, I used to write blog posts, and I would often the inspiration for those was an article I read or something I came across, and I try and write just kind of a reaction to it. I didn't have time for that anymore, but I was still finding a bunch of things I found interesting just throughout my encounters at work, browsing, things being forwarded to me, a variety of other ways. And usually I find, a half dozen or so a week. And I have a little Notion notebook. I called a FFF page in there, and I'll paste in links as I find them. And then on every Friday, I've done it every Friday except for vacations and holidays for about 2 years now. I'll just post a link. They're 90% links that were posted in the last week. Sometimes I find something old, and a little blurb on why I find it interesting. And people tend to click it and read it. What's really interesting from that is because a lot of ideas come from the network, and every once in a while, but consistently, when I post a link to someone's article or blog or whatever, they'll see the what's it called, the track back in their own blog stats, and they'll email me a day or a week later and thank me for linking to their site and ask me how I found it and or what I found interesting about it, and we'll have a short little conversation, which is good because sometimes just establishing those little teeny bits of networking is good for building out bigger ideas later.
You said you had a presentation or a way to introduce this topic? Did you want to?
I can. I got to kick my dog out of here.
Oh, okay.
Join the conversation. Are you done? Just telling me. 1 second here. I'm going to get my daughter to go let the dog outside. Okay, we'll see if that works. Yeah, let me share something, which will cover a little bit what we talked about, but I just thought it would be fun to share a little bit of a journey on where I get my ideas from and why I like learning so much. Those things, the host has disabled participant screen sharing. I'll need a little bit of elevation because I think just my love of learning is why I seek out these things and why I'm not just happy living in my box. I want to know what's in everybody else's boxes as well. So those things have been very intertwined for me. In fact, I'll talk about this in a bit, but I rely on my ability to learn things quickly, to both actually all knowledge work, of which software development, software testing is part of, require that you learn in order to be successful at your job. And that's the key to my success. I just try and learn new stuff all the time, and realize that I'm always at a point where there's far more that I don't know than I do know.
Do you have
So,
a learning arc that you keep track of, or
no.
just whatever is useful, you follow that?
Yeah, I don't have a path. I make sure I keep myself on a steep learning curve. So I want to start with a story for not too long ago. I wrote an article, a chapter about this in a book called, I forget what it's called, but it was a collection ebook from stories of testers all over the world. And I wrote one called "Keep Your Always Be on the Steepest Learning Curve" or something like that. I'll find a link to the book. I was not prepared, but the idea started with this. I was walking down the hall and I heard a conversation and people were talking about some stuff I didn't know. And I said, "Oh, I know how to do that," which was a lie. I was bored and they were talking about introducing some static analysis tools, including sonar, and putting it behind LDAP networking for our team working on this stupid project at Microsoft to make Android apps run on Windows Phone. That part doesn't matter. I'll tell the story over lots of beers someday. But I was on this team because I followed my manager there after working on Xbox One, and I had already completed everything I wanted to do on the project and I was bored. So I said I knew how to do this because I knew I could figure it out. So typically once the first few times I did that and I was scared of losing my job, I realized I liked learning new things. But if we go back even like 15 years earlier, about 5 years into my career at Microsoft, I became one of Microsoft's first test architects. I don't know how, because at the time I felt like I didn't know that much about testing. So I started reading a lot of books, not just about testing, but books about business books and business fables and anything I could do, organizational change a lot because it was a role of influence. I started reading a lot. And one of the books I found was, I remember where I was. One of the books I found, which probably influenced me a lot, was, I don't remember what the book was. I tried to see if I could find it, but in the appendix of the book, I don't know if the book was about leadership or something. It said, one way to grow is to try and get new ideas. And it had suggestions. And it suggested I subscribe to like some magazine outside of your field and read it and get ideas from there. And they won't directly apply, just gets the seeds planted in your head. So I did that. And so really that's when I got the sort of the inkling that just getting a whole bunch of ideas into my head would prepare me for the future. So it was a way of creating my own luck. So even well before then, I'll go back to the origins of my love of learning. This is the textbook I still have for I don't have a tech, I shouldn't say I don't have a tech background. I do not have a computer science related degree from university. I have a degree in music composition, and I have a graduate degree in that as well. This is the textbook for my methods of musical research course, or required course on research. Teacher for that was wonderful. It was all about, research. And this was pre-internet, so it was in the library a lot of the times. And every week we got a list of these 5 things called trivial pursuits. And we were promised that the answer was somewhere in the library, and we needed to find the answer and notate the answer in whatever the bibliographic notation of the week was. And we have questions like those on the right. I'll read the shorter ones. In what book will you find biographical notes after 3 song poses of India? And right now you're all thinking, I can Google search this stuff. I know I have good Google Foo. My phone thinks I'm talking to it. I have good Google Foo, but I think it comes from this class. And I honestly, I don't remember how I found the answers to these with card catalog, microfiche. My teacher would sometimes move books. So part of it was, you think about testing and being thorough, like you go to, you think you found the book you needed to find and it wasn't there, but the goal was to look around and he had misfiled it like on a shelf in the area. So he asked a question, what does Gabriel have between his teeth? And these were great. This is my Saturday fun. I go to the library at Saturday at 8 a.m. and I leave when the library closed. It usually took me about that long to finish, but they were fun. And Gabriel had a drumstick between his teeth. I looked for a picture. I even found in my notes the book it was from, but the book, I can't find it on the internet with Google. So, but that was sort of the beginning of my love of learning. So I mentioned earlier, the way to get good ideas is get a lot of ideas, throw the bad ones away. I didn't make that up. That's from Linus Pauling, who may be from the Portland area, if I remember right.
He did live in Oregon for a while, and there's just about 5 blocks from me is the Linus Pauling house. So yes.
Cool. So I used to read this little magazine called Science News, which was one of the recommendations from that book I talked about. And it was a little thin weekly thing about 8 pages. And some of it I didn't understand, but some of it was interesting. It wasn't like I read it and I go, oh, I'm going to apply the way bats use sonar to a code coverage algorithm. I never made those connections, but it planted ideas that just, I like to think they expanded or gave me more of a systems view of looking at things. So it just sort of fueled my desire to get as many ideas in my head as I could, so I could eventually figure out how to splurge them together. So, Moss, you asked earlier, where do the good ideas come from? And I mentioned the Pauling quote, but also I came across this book from Stephen Johnson, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And he's written a ton of great books. But this idea of where good ideas come from. And I'm not going to walk through all these examples, but he talks about the adjacent possible, which means you can't invent, as much as we thought we'd have flying cars today, it's still not possible. We don't have the technology there. YouTube launched in 2005 and it was massively successful. We had an internet in 1995, but YouTube would not have been successful had it launched then. Some of you are like me and are old enough to remember dialing up to your internet through AOL, or I had, what was mine called? Net Cruiser, some ISP with my 14.4 modem or 28A modem, I guess.
I think I had Prodigy first.
I mentioned for like the Slow Hunch is the Berners-Lee story is classic there. Sometimes it takes a long time to come up with an idea. Sometimes it's the right place at the right time, or being able to, I think a good example there is when there were a couple physicists who were trying to track Sputnik in when it was in the news, it was in orbit, Sputnik's in orbit. They wanted to use the Doppler effect to try and track where it was. And I'm not a scientist, I might get some of the terms wrong, but they were able to do it, and I thought it was cool. And they were sharing what they were doing. And someone from the military contacted them. They weren't in trouble, but they said, this is really cool. Could you do the opposite? I said, what do you mean? Could you use a satellite to track where something was with the device on the Earth somewhere? And they said, well, that's actually easier. Yeah, we could do that. And that was the beginning of GPS. The textbooks were filled with inventions that come from errors. Of course, now I have to see if I can think of one. Penicillin, good example of something that was originally an error.
The Post-it note was an adhesive that didn't work very well.
Yeah, right. It was meant to be. Yeah, exactly. The white noise of cosmic radiation. I like astronomy. They thought it was a mistake. They realized it was proof of the Big Bang. Things like that. Exaptation, probably worth talking about a little bit as well. What's a good, well, probably the good tie into here is that it wasn't until we had, if you look at the Enlightenment, that happened when we had coffee houses in Europe. Getting people connected, actually, it makes a big difference in where innovation comes from. Conferences like this. So when you have meetups or when you have your conference in October, getting people to engage and talk with each other helps bring new ideas to light. And we've all had examples of this. And it's one of the things that's a lot harder during everyone working from home is everything's over Zoom, and it's hard to have those more casual, wandering conversations that lead to some sort of great idea.
Would you say that exaptation is borrowing? What's a good definition of that?
It's borrowing from one thing for another. So coffee houses, and the reason I brought up coffee houses and going back to networking there, but really they weren't designed for, maybe it's not a great example. They were designed to give people coffee and have them, let them sit and drink and read, but they ended up being the reason through exaptation for things like the Enlightenment to happen. Another example, I don't know if I can think of one. And then finally, we build on platforms. So a lot of the ideas come from, I guess even, well, I don't have a good example off the top of my head. Let me think.
Well, I mean, just like a newer example would be Steam as a platform for delivering
Sure.
video games.
It enables indie games to get out there and get their ideas out. So, I highly recommend the book, but it answers your question from earlier is where do you get ideas? They come from a lot of places, and you have to get a lot and find a way to put them all up in a shaker and get them to connect and intermingle. And maybe it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to figure out which pieces fit together, and some come together right away and some take a long time. But there's one quote, which is, it comes, when we talk about me and new ideas, is chance favors the connected mind, which is from Stephen Johnson's book. And if you have a network, if you have connections, if you can talk to people, or in these days when we can't talk to people, I'm reading more. If you can start to get more of these ideas in your head and find connections, you're going to be, your brain and you will be more open to discovery of ideas that are new, or at least new to you. One example from Microsoft worth sharing is really way back in my early days there. We had a research department, and they came up with a tool called basic block technology. And for those of you that have been using computers as long as I have, and again, I never used a computer until I was 20 or so. When we had non-solid state hard drives that were very, very slow, what would happen is a program would get fragmented. And probably all of you remember defragging your hard drive. Well, in reading a program from disk was slow. And we wanted to speed that up. So what the research department did was they had a program that would look at the way your program ran. So basically take a program like Excel, run it through all of the happy path most used scenarios. And this program would monitor which bits of the executable code and DLLs, et cetera, were used for that. And then it would reorder your binary. So those all could be read sequentially off disk versus random access, which made the program up to 60 to 80% faster for those happy paths, which was nice. And they used that for a long time until hard drive speed caught up. But the exaptation of that is still in use today, because they had the information on which blocks of code were used. They used that to measure code coverage across native code of Microsoft, probably to this day. It was when I left 5 years ago. That was the main tool for getting code coverage for native applications.
Nice.
Another thing to bring up is the 5 orders of ignorance, which is another thing I discovered somewhere back there, which explain, and Moss is nodding because he knows this. This is a method from Philip Armour that talks about how we acquire knowledge. It's a knowledge discovery framework. Of course, because he's a computer guy, there's 0 base. So at the 0th order of ignorance is when you just don't know how to do something. I do not know how to speak Chinese. I know I don't know it. I don't know it. But I could learn it if I wanted. I know I could take a class. I could do Duolingo. I could I could go live in China for a while. I have multiple ways to go learn that, but I know I don't know it. At the 1st order of ignorance, I just talked about that. I don't know something, but I don't know something, but I know that I don't know how to do it. Meaning, like in Chinese, I can go learn it. At the 2nd order of ignorance, I don't know what I don't know. I can't give you an example by definition, but this is we need to discover it. So in 3rd order is a lack of process, which means I don't have a suitable means to discover what I don't know. And I do, because I do meetups like this. I do conferences. I read a lot, purely because I know there are things I don't know, and I need a system to discover those. So I try and find as many ways as I can to bring knowledge into me. And then I may recognize that I don't know it. So then once I know I don't know it, I can learn it. And then it moves on down the stack. And then the 4th order, the top order, is I don't know about these. It sounds kind of almost a tautology at first, is I don't know about the 5 orders of ignorance. But what he really means there is you don't understand that this is the way knowledge is acquired. And the way you acquire knowledge is you figure out, you have some way or some methods of discovering things you don't know, and then you either choose or not choose to learn more about them until they become a skill or knowledge that you have. So this has been very enlightening for me as well. I think testers spend a lot of time in that. Now apply these to software. Often you may not know what you're looking for at first, so you try and learn about the piece of software we're testing in order to learn more about it, so we can begin to understand the behavior of it. But for personal knowledge, it works really well. And then just to conclude, because I forgot to mention earlier, or I didn't mention, is that project I didn't know how to do, but I said I did anyway, that I lied about. It took about a week. It wasn't very hard. And then one thing about me is I don't handle being bored very well. So I ended up leaving and working on a different team at Microsoft after that, just so I could I kind of like that feeling of being slightly uncomfortable in my learning curve. I believe that if people are overwhelmed in their work, that they don't function very well. We probably all felt that way at least once during the last 12 months. It's just, there's so much to do, it's hard to figure out where to start. But also, if you're bored, you're kind of complacent, and you're not very productive there either. I think we do our best work in knowledge work if we're a little bit uncomfortable, if we have that balance between some hard stuff, enough hard stuff to do, don't quite know how to do, the stuff we're good at, and very little of that menial work. So that's some context I wanted to give. And hopefully from here, we could just do some ideas and Q&A and dig deeper and see where it leads. So I'll leave some information up there. The 5 for Friday is the only thing I put on my blog these days. Occasionally I'll write a longer article that goes someplace else on the internet, but I'll link to it for my 5 for Friday because I'm not against self-promotion. Twitter, the podcast with Brent Jensen called A/B Testing, easily searchable in your favorite podcast player. And you can always email me as well. So maybe there we can stop and see if anyone has questions about anything I talked about, or wants to build on ideas I said, or wants to compliment my dog for giving up on me and going to sleep.
Sure. Yeah, we could open the floor for if anybody has a question. If you want to either put it in chat, or you can unmute yourself and show your video and ask a question. I know that the levels of ignorance. What is it? Levels of
The 5 levels of ignorance.
Yeah, I've seen that before and I've forgotten that so many times. So I guess, I don't know, I'm in the meta ignorance, I guess, because I keep forgetting about it. But the last year I've been working, normally I really enjoy working with software, but I've been spending time working with my dad on old cars from the 40s and the 30s. And I thought I was just at the first order of ignorance, that I just didn't know how to work on cars. But actually, their hardware is actually hard. I mean, like, there are certain things when you have a bolt, you can't stretch aluminum onto a bolt. You have to figure out how to work with the bolt and the aluminum together without breaking anything. It's so I mean, without actually having little hands-on knowledge, I wouldn't have gotten to that second level of knowing that there are other things that I don't know about, you know. So just go for it.
Next question, because it's really good. Is online discovery of information fundamentally different than physical discovery? If so, how? And my first answer, the answer to any sufficiently complex question is it depends. But in this case, it can be. Of course, well, I'll give you an opinion and an answer. And the opinion is, I think, in general, people are lazy with online discovery of information. And in a perfect world, I go back and add some of the things to the presentation, but it's why I gave time for questions so we can cover these things. I have to go back to my time in the library and trying to discover things. It's obviously more time consuming, but there's some serendipitous discovery that can happen when you're looking at a stack of books in a library versus doing a search on the internet or scrolling through Amazon. So that's missing. On the other hand, I think I mentioned that people are a little lazy searching on the internet, and I'll give you a couple bits of advice. If you really want to dig in on something, don't just do a Google search and give up. You need to do a Google search with a couple different terms. Go ahead and scroll to that second or third page. Look at scholar.google.com so you can get an index search of research papers written. If you can find a research paper written, and this is some advice I was given in print books a long time ago, but applies to research papers as well. If you find something in an area you're interested in, don't just read the paper, but go look and where they got their references from and go read those references and follow those. And they have references, follow those as well. I think if you really want to get deep and understand some different views and opinions on things, doing that digging will help. I tell people that the first time I read a book on software testing, I felt like now I know a lot about software testing. And then I read another book and I thought, well, okay, now I know a lot. And then I read a third book and I realized that there was a lot to learn about software testing because I began to see contradictions. And then as I read my fourth and fifth book, I began to be able to form my own opinions I felt strongly about. Even the most well-researched and peer-reviewed papers will often take a little bit of liberty from their sources. So following up with looking through the sources and seeing how they're phrased and see why they said what they did, I think is super valuable for pulling in those ideas, which isn't exactly the question you added. But I think, yeah, there is a fundamental difference than physical discovery, but I think it's two things. One, there's the visual like stacks versus Google search, but I don't think online searchers also use the full power of the internet to do the same discovery that people would do when they had to spend several hours in a library researching a topic. Does that work for you, Brett? Want any follow-ups? Oh, cool. Great answer. I'll take it.
If you were interviewing someone for a job position and you asked them what about learning something, what sort of question would you ask them about learning?
Holy crap, that's a good and relevant question. I did not plant that, but I've done a lot of interviews at Microsoft. For many years, I was what's called an as appropriate interviewer, which meant that at the end of your interview, I would be the one to talk to you and see if you were someone who would do well. And a lot of times, the person did so well through the interviews that I could just sell them during the interview. But one thing I often did, and I will get around to answering your question, is I would look at their resume, and I have a strong feeling that people who love to learn, well, actually, not a feeling, experience, people that love to learn and have a passion for it will do well in any knowledge work, especially in software. So I would look for that a lot in the interview, and I would pick something from their interview, like from their resume, sorry, and they may say avid photographer or love photography. I go, okay, great. And I ask them, I say, it says here you like doing photography. Tell me about what do you do to get better at that? And candidate A may say, well, I take a lot of pictures and I share them with my family, and sometimes I edit them, and it's just fun. I like taking pictures, it makes me feel good. Okay, not a horrible answer. Candidate B, however, says, well, I bought a good camera, then I felt like I didn't know how to use it properly, so I signed up for a class, and then I ended up making a club in the class, and we do a weekly meetup where we review each other's photos, and we're constantly working on trying to make better framing. We bought a few magazines and books, and we worked, and I joined an online club, and now I'm the I'm the admin on the photography subreddit on Reddit, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This person's passionate about learning things, much more than person A. So I can usually get it out of questions like that, just picking the non-irrelevant bits of their resume and see if they have a passion for learning new things. But I use that a lot.
Does anyone else have a question right now? I don't see anything in chat, but we're open.
They're thinking.
I'm not going to call anybody else out, but I could say, oh, Ernie or Ian, do you guys have a question for Alan? One thing that I have, go ahead.
I was going to say Tyler has a question, I'm sure.
It's hard to follow up after two great questions, so I'll ask a bad one possibly here. Was actually, and so actually I'm kind of curious how, this feels very much for like an individual, and how do I get better ideas as a person? How do we scale it across a team, an organization, a company, and encourage this type of culture of ideation?
That is not a bad question. All right, next. No. So remember, chance favors the connected mind, and we can't invite, and again, this is harder with Zoom, and even with, I was actually talking about one thing I did, but where your brain starts going and your mouth doesn't keep up? I'll start over again. We need to create environments where ideas can come together. So brown bags, or even better yet, just sort of a, like we had a brown bag this week where someone just presented a book review of the book Accelerate, which was great. Had lots of discussion and questions, be able to get ideas. That's one way we can basically find ways for your team to connect and talk about things. Now, granted, this has been much harder the last year. Something I've done worth mentioning here is, remember, not all good ideas come from talking. Well, the other problem is all we talk about is work. We never get to have those more random hallway conversations or coffee machine conversations. So it's been especially hard. So one thing I did recently in our office was, actually started about 6 months ago, is I made a Slack channel. We're heavy Slack users, and it's called Talk Daily Question. And every day I post an example of what I think a question that you may hear when you walk in to get a cup of coffee in the morning, but people could answer asynchronously. And some questions only get 4 or 5 answers, and some questions get 30 or 40 answers. I never know. It depends on a lot of things. There's no requirement to answer. But the idea behind that is get people talking about anything, because I really feel over the last 12 months, a drop in our ability to get new ideas from our team. So I think if you can find ways to do that without increasing the Zoom fatigue, that's good. When we get to the end of this long dark tunnel, I would suggest that you find ways to get your team together, and just pick a subject to talk about. Like, let's take a half hour a week or an hour a week. Maybe after your retro or something, you spend an extra 15 minutes talking about a book, an idea. What do you think of, what would it take for our company to have a mono repo, or to what would be the advantages of increasing our code coverage by 10%? What if we just stopped running all these tests? Just have a conversation and debate about it. Just see what comes out, and use active listening to invite people into the conversation and get everyone's opinion the best you can. Those things will generate ideas on your team. Also, another thing I do in my org is I encourage a lot of fluidity for people to work on different things with each other across the organization. So I manage about 70 people. And we're very self-organizing teams. I try and enable people to work on almost anything they want to work on, as long as it fits our priorities. And that gets that cross what's the word I'm looking for? Cross connection.
Cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination between people and teams that gets those ideas flowing. So you can do things like that as well. So no, I like that question. And the answer is, do as many things as you can to get people to talk to each other without burning them out on Zoom.
Got it. Thanks.
There's a question from Janelle. I'm not a programmer or developer. Any suggestion on how to learn about how to do testing automation?
That's a very specific question. It depends what you want to know about testing automation. I'm a firm believer, and this is where my opinions have evolved over the years as I begin to run DevOps teams and look at the research around this. I don't think testers should write test automation. I think the developers should write it. So, but that's not your question. That's my opinion. But I think you want to know enough about it to know maybe what can be automated. So maybe one thing I've done in the past, and you can do this whether you're a programmer or a developer, is make a mind map of how you would test some feature. And everything from examples I've used in, like, let's take a Slack message bar. I want to do a message, make sure it sends. I want to do a very long message with special characters. I want to send a bunch of messages in a row. I can just brainstorm this forever, make a mind map. And then with the developer, sit down and go, here's how I think, or all the ways I can test this. Help me figure out which ones should be automated, which ones are redundant, and we can, and in that conversation, you can begin to understand how someone would apply automation to enable testing. And one of my Alanisms I'll share today, which many of you probably already heard, is you should automate 100% of the tests that should be automated. And in that conversation with the developer, you should be able to figure out, like, they're gonna say, well, they might get to one and say this can't be automated. Great, that's one that goes in my list of tests to go run, and that's fine. But you might get some ideas on learning about automation just by understanding, from looking at a list of potential test scenarios, which ones they think could be automated, even if they don't go do them, even though I think they should. Okay, good question here. Not just about the talk today, but I'll answer it. Which books, authors, or ideas did you take as a reference when you created the modern testing principles? So I purposely did not preach about the modern testing principles, and you can go look these up on your own at moderntesting.org. But the main thing with these is, Brett and I came up with these as a way to describe what we were talking about on the podcast, but we weren't describing anything new. We weren't trying to preach anything or invent anything. We were trying to document what we were already seeing across teams, some teams at Microsoft, and a lot of teams in the industry on delivery. So that said, it's all stolen. We didn't do any of it. A lot of it is from the Lean Startup. A lot of the ideas there. Some are from Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory's Agile Testing book. Where else did we steal from? Of Theory of Constraints. So The Goal is a great book on the theory of constraints, and there's one written especially for software called The Phoenix Project. Again, written by the same author as, maybe not. So The Phoenix Project, I'll leave there. So those books are probably the biggest influencers there, but the main thing there is we were seeing teams begin to deliver quality software with very few or without dedicated testers. And we wanted to explain why so people wouldn't freak out. But that's probably the gist of it. Lean startup for the most of it. And then Sean asks, good to get opened up here with questions. When it comes to learning new things when starting a new position or role, do you have an approach that has worked better than others? So let me think. I've been in new roles quite a bit. Well, yeah, I do. I very much apply an agile approach to, meaning an adaptive approach to everything I do, whether it's new ideas for my team or new things on a new team. I'm going to try stuff and I'm going to pay attention to what works and have some metric or at least a heuristic to know if what I'm doing is working or not. So I'm going to try a bunch of stuff, see what works. The stuff that doesn't work, I'm not going to do anymore. And the stuff that works, I'm going to do more of. And this comes from, and I have almost an endless supply of things to try because I will read and get blogs, books, etc. When I took the role I'm in now at Unity, I had been a director of quality and I had dissolved my team. I didn't fire anyone. I moved them into roles on the dev team. Some are still in dedicated testing roles or into DevOps roles. And all of a sudden I was looking for a new job at Unity, and I was talking to a VP of engineering in our basically our online services division, I'll call it. And he said, yeah, I'd love to have you. Can you do program management? And I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but I basically same answer as I gave in that first slide. Sure, I can do that. And then I joined the org and I bought, there's a really good book from Johanna Rothman on program management, which described what I wanted to do. And I tried a bunch of stuff until I figured out, and of course, program management can mean a lot of things to different people. What he wanted me to do and what I ended up really loving doing was running what we call now the engineering operating system, helping teams deliver and figuring out how to adapt and improve, doing some agile coaching. It was a blast. Now I have a team that does that for me and I do other stuff instead, but yeah, try stuff. If you're in over your head, quickly find something to read. Another story, and it wasn't over my head. I was working on one of a version of Windows 9X, the old consumer Windows. Again, I'm old. And I was so excited. I had it just shipped Windows 98 and I'd done very well in that project. So they paired me with one of like the original Windows developers to work on fixing the version of debug Windows and the debugger that hadn't worked very well in a long time. I thought I'm going to get to learn from someone, and I'm this music guy. I'm going to get to learn from someone who knows what they're doing because it's going to be great. He's probably going to figure out, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll still learn a lot before whatever happens. And then a week after that, he said, you know what? I can't justify working anymore. I'm retiring. And so I did it on my own. So I bought a book on assembly and I just tried stuff and I just experimented and I was so afraid, but eventually I started getting stuff to work and eventually dug myself out and I wasn't scared anymore. So those sorts of things, Sean.
One thing I wanted to follow up on Janelle's question was, I think, and kind of what you're saying is that, thinking about learning test automation might be a large task, but what you're kind of implying is start with small steps, and just get your hands kind of dirty.
Start with why, figure out.
Start with why. Good.
I understand why it's important. I think a lot of people who even have programming experience want to get into automation. And they start automating for the sake of automating, and they don't understand why they're doing it. They don't understand why it's important or what's important to automate, or the goal of automation. They're just automating some stuff because they have the tools to go do it. And I really hate that approach. So I think if you, like with my suggestion, if you could start by understanding what things can be automated and what the power of that is, versus things that shouldn't be automated or things that don't need to be automated, you're in a much better start. Because then once you understand that, you're already ahead of most of the people writing automation today. And from there, if you want to, then you can do small steps. You can learn to automate one little thing. I wrote a lot of batch files in DOS and Windows, and that was my first automation. In fact, I had a ton of really good test automation written in batch files when I worked on the early days of Windows 95. I tested networking, so I just looped through a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't know if you've addressed Sean's question yet. When it comes to learning new things, when starting a new position or role, do you have an approach that's worked better than others?
Yep, I answered that.
Okay, sorry. Maybe I missed the beginning of that.
Even Sean agrees.
And then next one from Dwayne, how would you encourage a direct report to become more of a learner or move towards being more willing to try things?
There was a book, what's the author's name? Huddle? I can't quite remember. No, it won't come to me. But it's a book called Mindset. And it talks about a fixed mindset where you believe you know what you know and that's it. And the growth mindset where you realize, which obviously I've described, which is where you know you have to learn stuff and learning stuff is part of who you are and what you do. I don't believe that mindsets are set in stone forever, but what you have to do is get this person to realize that your growth, like your career growth, your personal growth, your job satisfaction and happiness will come when you realize that you need to learn new things. I'm going to make this whole talk about dropping books. So when you look at Dan Pink's work in Drive, he says what motivates us is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And autonomy means we don't micromanage people. We give them some room we give them a framework they can work in and try and stay out of their way and then come in and help them when they need it. Purpose means they have to feel like their job matters. They have to feel like what they do is important for the company. It just can't be meaningless work. But then mastery is they have to have the skills they need to be successful. But a lot of that is discovery. And I think this fits in there into your question, because we have to provide opportunities or is it opportunities? We have to actually, opportunities, because we want to put people on that steep learning curve. So if I have a direct report who doesn't know they need to become more of a learner, I'm going to give them something they don't know how to do. And I won't let them fail, but I'll let them completely, at least. I'm going to let them flounder a little bit and ask them, how are you going to figure out how to do this? What are you going to do? How can I help? But get them going. But I think even that comes down to you have to have a culture of psychological safety where they're not going to feel like they're going to get in trouble if they can't figure out how to do it. But you can help them learn how to fail a little bit. And with that failing and floundering comes a lot of learning. There's a great quote, which I can't remember, but there are multiple quotes around failure being the root of learning. I was going to quote a clever one, but I don't remember it. So give them something they're going to fail at a little bit and help them get through it. And I think that's the way I would start. I would give them a hard project they don't know how to do, or a very tiny one, and see what happens. And it makes great one-on-one questions where you can ask, like, what do you think is a good amount of time to get stuck on this before, sorry about that. This is a great question for one-on-one, is ask, how long do you think it's okay to be stuck on this before you ask me a question? And you can have a different conversation if they say, well, 5 minutes or 3 days, which are both probably wrong, right? And there's no right answer, but based on what they say, the answer shouldn't be a time limit. It's going to say, well, probably when I've been unable to find an answer, or they might just say, like, when I can't find an answer, then you can answer with, well, how many times? Like, should it be maybe you look in 2 places for an answer or 3 places. No, well, 3 seems good. Okay, that sounds good to me too. But things like that. That helped, Dwayne? Yep, that's those things.
Do you think in that there are, I mean, both corporate cultures and human cultures, there are different ways to approach failure. You know, some places are very conservative and don't want to admit to any failures. Do you think there's any way that you can help somebody become more agile or more lean by accepting short, quick failure times?
Yeah, well, like you can't have agile in a company that doesn't accept failure. Doesn't work. Something has to give. So remember, because yeah, agile is about failing a lot and adapting. It's trying stuff and learning. It's and you get into lean, it's about experimentation completely. And I could quote a lot of stuff from the lean startup, but it does come down to culture in the beginning. You have to have a culture where learning is encouraged. Peter Senge has a book called The Fifth Discipline, where he talks about the learning organization is like the biggest advantage you can have. So if you have an I'm gonna see if I can come up with books faster than people can type in Amazon links for them. Senghe. And yeah, an organization that focuses on learning as a core value has a competitive advantage over any other organization. So having an organization that's very uptight and where failure is not an option are probably not going to be successful in the long run. Because especially Pat Lencioni, who I love all of his business fables, has written one book of nonfiction called The Advantage, where he has a bunch of research that shows that organizational health is a key indicator of product quality, regardless whether it's software or hardware or cars or whatever. If people are happy in their work, they produce good work. So if you have a culture where happiness is hard because or whatever, and maybe people are happy being in a lockdown world where learning isn't expected, then I guess if they were happy doing that, they're the right employees there, they could be successful. But I think it's for someone like me, it would be pure hell.
Is Pat Lencioni? That's
Yeah, that's the right one, Melissa.
okay.
You have to make a bibliography out of this chat. I did mention that. Remember, I had a slide with a stack of books. I told you I read a lot. I'm unconfident in my own ability to come up with ideas. I have to re-synthesize other people's.
After this talk, I can also post the recording and summary of the notes on the PNSQC website if anybody wants to have that, and I'll post a link from there to from the meetup to the PNSQC website. Melissa had a question about reining in someone's ideas.
Oh, yeah. I won't make you speak up and give an example, but let me know if this is close, and if not, you can clarify. So sometimes someone will have an idea, and it's so far out there you can't do anything. A notion, I know what book it's from. I'm just going to leave it out for now. A notion I always use is you have current state, we know where we're at. There's a desired state, which is maybe this idea needs to be reined in. The only thing we can do now are the next steps. So when we talk about big changes, like I have a senior VP I work with who only can think, it seems, about the desired state. Like, we should do X. I said, great idea. That'll take years. Says, I know it'll take years. Okay, fine. The only thing we can do now are the next steps. So when you have that employee who is, he has the big idea, you go, that's like for whatever it is. And it just can't be done realistically in any normal amount of time. You can just say that would be cool. What would be the first steps we would take to get there? What would we do first? What's something we could do in a week that would be in that direction? And you could go do that. And then a week later or whatever, you revisit, you go, so if we're going to keep going, what would be next? And they can go do that thing. And often what you'll find is, so you're in current state, that never changes. Well, it moves along in time with you. The desired state will bounce around because this execution of the next steps always leads to discovery, which changes what you think the desired state should look like. So just start. But often you don't need to go all the way to desired state. Like, let's say, for example, you want to, our desired state is, I want to be able to deploy every single check-in within 5 minutes of merge. Okay, great. We don't have all kinds of stuff we need to do there. What would be the first thing we do? And that may be, well, we should improve. We need better tests. Okay, let's break that down. Where do we need better tests? We need to make sure we're not testing the database at all automated before we deploy. Okay, next steps, we're going to add those. And then you can come back and revisit it. And you make it to a point where you never need to do the grandiose goal to be reined in, but you've done enough where you've actually improved a lot of the systems to a stage where you don't need to go that far to be successful.
I think in Scrum, that's one advantage to the iteration length, setting the iteration length. It protects the target moving around too much, during your iteration. And it depends on the team, I'm sure. But if you're working on something for a week and during that time your champion chooses a new target, every 3 days, you're kind of protected from zooming around.
There's lots of rituals and process in there to say you can't.
Definitely, yeah. Tyler posted another question. Sometimes we have good ideas that don't take off. How do you build momentum around ideas?
Well, the answer to any sufficiently complex question is it depends. So the second question is maybe a bit of the second sentence is maybe a bit of a non sequitur from the first. So you have a good ideas that don't take off. You're assuming it was good. Maybe it didn't take off because it wasn't good. But that said, let's assume that it was a good idea and you're not getting the momentum behind it. You can question why that is. Boy, this is going to be super contextual. So let me come up with an example. One way is to, let's say it's a new tool. Here's the easy one. I have this new tool that makes all this stuff easier and nobody's using it. Screw them, I'm going home. How do people discover this new tool? What's their investment in it? One thing I found, if you want to get somebody to adopt an idea, you make it brain dead super easy for them to use it. Build it into their workflow. I've done that a lot. One of the reasons I probably run an org with the most influence over quality that I ever have in my life is because I control all of the systems we use for checking in code and running tests and running auditing and analysis, etc. We can often, the new things we build, we just put into the workflow. We just built a tool. My team also runs all of the networking for the company, all the routing, etc., for our external sites. And we built a tool that allows any team to self-serve that stuff using a tool versus coming to us and finding it and coming to us and having us do it for them. So we got them to adopt it we have some automation in Slack that just when someone posts a question about network engineering using some keywords, it automatically replies with a link to this tool for discovery. So there's one example. You have to find a way to get people to think your idea is good. They won't think it's good just because you think it's good. So there's an Eisenhower quote, leadership is getting people to do things you want them to do because they think they want to do them. And often getting your ideas adopted are the exact same thing. Also, probably the most important thing is they need to understand what problem it solves. Like, here's an idea you should use. Why? Why should I care? If you can frame it around a problem you're solving for them, it says, I think this thing is really hard. Well, I think putting your pants on every morning is really hard, so I made an invention that puts your pants on for you. That's about the worst example I can come up with, so it's a good one. And they may come back and say, you may think it's a good idea, and they come back and say, I don't need help putting my pants on in the morning. Oh, then I guess my idea wasn't as good as I thought. But if you can frame it, if they agree they have the problem that you're solving with that idea, then they're going to be a lot more amiable to using that idea.
I added to your bibliography there by adding Fearless Change, the book by Linda Rising and I forget her first name, Mans. In that one, I mean, aside from I guess that is the next topic leading on from your talk here is once you learn something new, how do you get other people to accept these new ideas? And she has basically, I guess it's their thesis on how to introduce patterns of introducing new ideas to cultures and, especially corporations. And it's very interesting to read. And, there are ways to borrow influence or to, get a guru involved and have the guru say, that's a great idea. Or, like you were saying,
I'm not going far.
Okay, have them think that it's their own idea, basically by letting them own the idea. Or, looking for a championship, a champion stakeholder in the organization to promote the idea. So that's something more to add to your book list there. Uh-oh, Alan's gone. He went far.
My books, unfortunately, my bookshelves are in absolutely no particular order. So I'd like to try and remember where I saw a book, because there's a book, I can't remember who the author is. It's really good for this too. But you are not going to hear about it today because I don't know what I did with it. It's a mystery for now.
And I just wanted to point out that Linda Rising was at PNSQC in 2012. She led a workshop on influencing, which was, I think I attended that workshop. It's very influential. Huh?
Yeah, I've got a question for Alan. Alan, I was wondering, when it gets warm, are you going to cut your beard?
Oh, you missed the beginning. We talked about that. I will begin grooming again when I get vaccinated.
That's exactly.
It's just I don't give a crap anymore.
That's exactly what I said. I haven't cut my hair since February of last year.
I cut mine once myself last summer.
Well, somebody wrote me a direct message, and they had a comment that they said that they didn't think that you could learn Chinese if you wanted to.
Oh. Maybe I picked a bad example. But I think I could. Not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I disagree.
Okay. And the other comment was that they were concerned that people would take your personal ways of learning and think that it would apply to them.
Oh yeah,
that your methods can't necessarily or do not necessarily apply to other people. And I think I can agree with that a little bit, and it comes from my own learning experience in that, and it comes from my learning experience in Chinese, is that you have to try 10 or 20 different ways of learning to see what works best for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And, sometimes people learn well by memorizing characters, and sometimes it doesn't work too well, and it's even for people that take yoga classes. It's great to learn from many different yoga teachers so you can find a combination of styles that works for you, for your body, right? So
yeah, for sure.
I'd like to emphasize it. And I think it's really, what's really cool is that a lot of the you mentioned, I also have read. And so I really look forward to seeing you in person and discussing some of the books you've read and some of the ideas that you take out of them.
And those are good points. One thing is, like, for me as a introverted person, I just
Yeah.
like to read and disseminate, but the main thing, the
Mhm.
thing that I think is true for everyone is ideas come from other ideas. You have to
Mhm.
find a way to get them to mix. The
Mhm.
method you
Mhm.
use to do that definitely can vary from person to person. But
Mhm. Mhm.
probably between the examples of reading books and conferences and um, just sharing ideas,
Mhm.
should be some things in there that can work or be adapted to anyone.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing that you talked about was we just talked about was test automation, and somebody was asking you what you thought was the best way to learn about test automation. And um, I'd like to complement that and kind of maybe go off on a different tangent that that's what conferences are for, right? I think the best way, if you want to be an expert in test automation, you go around and you ask 20 different people what their top issues are in test automation. And you may get 21 different answers, but after a while, you start to understand what the issues are and you start to be able to form your own opinions
Yes.
and your own thoughts and kind of hybridizing some things together and then going off on your own and thinking about different ideas. But the other thing you mentioned was about, I think that one of the key issues in learning, especially something like test automation, is learning by doing. And, you know, for me, if I wanted to learn how to code in, PHP or whatever, Python, I would take some tutorials, some very, very simple things to learn by doing.
Yeah.
And you
I
can do
learned-
all
I
the
learned
studying
Rust.
in the world.
I learned Rust last, I can't remember. I've lost track of time. Summer, maybe?
Hmm.
Just through Code Academy. I'm not
Yeah.
great at it. I wanted to learn a new language.
Yeah, so this past year in the pandemic, I was at home a lot and I was doing a lot of work in my garden and setting up, some stone patios and things like that. And you can do all the measuring and planning in the world, and you could just never get started. And finally, I just said to myself, you know what? I just got to go get some stones, buy them, and just put them down there and see what happens. Because
Yeah.
you learn after the first few, oops, I should have done this. Oops, I should have done that. But you don't learn that kind of stuff by planning and reading.
No, exactly. You
So,
you get the
yeah,
ideas from there, but you have to apply them.
right. And you said about getting your hands dirty. I think it's really important to do that in just about everything.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Well, that's my only comment.
No, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we have I don't know, about 5 more minutes for the meetup, and I'd like to thank Alan for giving us his time and his insight into, how does he learn new things and how does he organize what to work on, what to learn. And also, I wanted to point out, if anyone's inspired by Alan's ideas, maybe you would be interested in submitting a talk or an abstract to PNSQC for the 2021 conference. I posted into the chat a link that talks about papers, presentations, and poster papers, and how you can submit an idea for an abstract. And we're all virtual this year, so you don't need to worry about additional costs of travel or staying in a hotel or anything like that. Unfortunately, that also means that we won't be able to share beers or drinks with anybody or have snacks, but we're going to be able to have lots of networking and possibly have some other extracurricular activities. And also, I wanted to point out, if you are not sure about a topic, if you have a couple different ideas, you can always feel free to write those up separately as each one as a separate abstract, and we're welcome. Oh, you're welcome to do that. Oops, I pressed a button here. Did anyone else have any final questions, either for me or for Phil about PNSQC, or for Alan to wrap up learning about new ideas? And I'm trying to figure out how to go back to a regular view here. There, I guess that's it.
If y'all think of things later, you're always welcome to ask me on Twitter.
He's one thing I guess I could ask you is, should I ask you why is it Angry Weasel?
You can if you want to read the whole story, you can go. It's on angryweasel.com in the About Angry Weasel page. But the short story is, a long time ago, I was playing in this funk band, and we needed a new name because our name was stupid. A bunch of us were Microsoft people, and our name of our band was Severity One, which is like the dumbest band name ever. So we're looking for a band name, and we were talking to a couple people after one of our shows, and a very drunk German person was telling the story, and he said, and the tooth of the weasel was so, and he was so angry, and we thought Angry Weasel would be a good band name. Our guitar player vetoed it, but I went ahead and got the domain anyway. And then when I was blogging on Microsoft's hosted blog site, but I wanted to move it to my own, I thought, oh, I already have a domain, so I'll put it on angryweasel.com, and that's it.
Evolution. There you go. All right. Well, thanks, Alan, for showing up, and thanks everyone else for attending and participating.
I try and be accountable.
And I'm glad you guys could all show up. And I guess I'll hang out here if anybody wants to talk, but otherwise you guys are, we're pretty much wrapped up for the day, right?
I think so. All right. I'll
Great to have everyone. Thanks for attending.
I'll talk
And we'll
to
see
y'all.
you. I look forward to getting all your abstracts.
Yes. Ping me if you need ideas. I'll help you up with an idea.
Okay.
We'll collaborate over Twitter.
And your dog is so comfortable there on the couch.
I know, she really mellowed out. She had a hard time at first and she gave up, but she knows that. Yeah, this is where she spends most of the day.
Seriously, thank you for helping out with this talk, or I mean, doing this talk. It was I'm trying to do a monthly meetup for PNSQC, and we're kind of scheduling things out. And I think by having new ideas is really a better way of getting people interested in promoting things for PNSQC.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
I'll go play with the dog for a while.
Good to see you again, Alan.
All right, good to see you too, Tyler. Tyler, where are you now?
I'm at Xbox, Minecraft.
Oh, okay. I saw the hoodie there. Okay.
Yeah, I was at Expedia for a couple of years, and then ran my own business before that. But yeah, I'm back at Microsoft now.
Tyler and I worked together a long time ago.
Yeah, good old teens days. Link.
Oh, really?
All right. Well, I'll see you around. Thanks.
All right. See you, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Let's see if I know how to stop recording.